the question inevitably comes up, as I'm dealing with religion and the sacred and things like that, am I prejudiced by having a wife who's a minister? And my usual explanation of that is that I'm not a member of the church, but I do sleep with the pastor. I am by inclination and training a philosopher of religion. I'm interested in the phenomenon of religion. I am not a theologian. I am not now a member of any official church. Somebody said that a theologian or a religious person is like a blind person in a dark room looking for a black cat that isn't there and finds it. Religion deals with and tries to discover an entity called God. As Paul Tillich used to say, if you discover an entity, it ain't God. It's just a part of things. It's just another being. Now, a philosopher is a different kind of being. A philosopher is like a blind man in a dark room, feeling around to try to find out what's there. Not with any notion that there is something there called a black cat or not. Exploring the environment of that dark room, which is human history, to try to find out what it's about. So tonight, what I want to do is I want to differentiate between three different ways of going on a quest. Human beings, among other things, we are a questing animal. Nietzsche always said that a human being is a being who is not yet. We are always living in the not yet. There's that restlessness in us our consciousness is restless. And we're that very strange kind of animal who don't know who we are until we tell ourselves a story about who we are. And that story has to include everything that is, because any other story is just short of that, so it involves all of the looking at life and the universe in the largest sense. And there are different ways of doing that, and the metaphors so I'm going to talk tonight about three different kinds of ways of thinking about that. And the first is I'm going to talk about a religious way of conducting your life. The name for that is usually that the path that you're following is a pilgrimage. And I'll tell you more about that later. The other is what is now called a spiritual quest. And I don't know how many times, I wish I had $1 for every time I've heard it. People say, well, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And that's really so vague, it's a little like that cotton candy you used to get at the fair. You sort of see this great big thing of cotton candy, and it would just vanish before your eyes. And the other is the way, which is the way that I advocate, and that is living in the presence of the sacred. So let me differentiate those, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means, what are the rules of the road, if there is a road, and if there are rules for these different ways of going about understanding ultimately what our life is about. Let me start with the idea that all historical religions go through 5 different phases. The first phase is that somebody, and it's almost always a man, goes out and has some kind of a crisis, some kind of an identity crisis, goes out into the wilderness, goes out to a place where they're alone. And in that time, this person experiences something in a way that is so dynamic and so life-changing. And it's something very simple, maybe like Moses, maybe like a burning bush, which is just an ordinary bush probably with sunshine on it in a particular way. Remember the E.B. White story of a guy who goes to a psychiatrist and he says, I don't know what I want, and I'm confused. And he asks the psychiatrist, do you know what you want? Yeah, the psychiatrist says, I'm normal, I want a Mercedes, and I want more money for this, and I want that, and I want a house on the beach. And this poor man goes out and from this psychiatric session, And suddenly he sees, like that out there, like that tree right there. He sees a tree which is illuminated by this incredible chrome light in the autumn, shining. He says, that's it. That's what I want, the third tree from the corner. Because why? Because in the moment that it's illuminated that way, it's no longer just a tree. It is an epiphany. It is something that speaks to him about the sacred. Something that says, look, there is something going on here that is sacred. So this is an experience of Moses. It's the experience of Chung Tzu, the Chinese philosopher. It's the experience of the prophet. All of the great figures, they start this way, of the Buddha. And then this experience, which is usually of something very mundane, it transforms them. They come back into society, and they come back in, and there's a quality they have that is so vital, that is so luminous, that is so life-giving, so electric, that people begin to flock around. So the second stage, the first stage is the experience of the sacred. The second is disciples begin to form around them. It begins a group. And what those disciples do is always, they then begin to mythologize that character. Oh, they begin to see that, and to say that he has all kinds of supernatural gifts. He walks on the water. He was born of a virgin, or that 13 elephants appeared when he was born, or all of these stories that make this person, again, who was just a normal person in a way, turns him into a supernatural savior and guru. And that's, I believe, exactly the way it was with Jesus. Something in Jesus' experience of his utter kind of being a God-intoxicated person, which evidently the crucial experience was when he was baptized, and John, put him in the water, and the holy dove came down, and it's okay. It's not blasphemy. It could have been anything, and came down, and he heard a voice. The voice said, "You're my beloved son," which is just a way of vocalizing the fact that he suddenly felt that he wasn't an orphan, that he belonged, that he was of ultimate value. So that's the second thing. Then they begin to mythologize that. The fourth thing then that begins is that they begin then, after the mythologies and the stories, then those things begin to be rationalized. They grow into a theology, and they grow into creeds, and they go into a formalization of all that is implied in the initial encounter. And then there becomes, of course, who is it now that is going to be the guardian of orthodoxy? Because you can't just have people telling any kind of stories about this, because by now the founder and the early disciples have begun to be very important, and all themselves seeing sort of in a supernatural light. And so it is very important that the way that people believe become standardized. Now, once they're standardized, then you begin to have an orthodoxy, and you begin to have a group that sees that they must have the miracle, mystery, and authority. I don't know how many of you remember the scene in the Brothers Karamazov where the Christ figure comes back to confront this old cardinal who's been in charge of the church forever. This old cardinal says to the Christ figure, he said, "The real truth is you don't love people. You don't love people. Because you tell people they have to be free. And human beings are sheep. They need to be led. They're children. You have to give them miracle, mystery, and authority, and that's what the church does. And we understand that that people are childlike." And so that is, and every orthodoxy is essentially, that's the message. We have to tell you, we have to certify what it is that you must believe in order to have the benefits of religion, which always have to promise some form of salvation. Now, you would think now that's we're at the end of the story about religion, but no, there's one more disastrous step in the evolution of religion. It's not enough. It's not enough, people, that you just know the truth and have the truth and believe the truth that I'm telling you. That's not enough. Because you realize that out there are a lot of people who don't believe these things, right? And those people out there are worshiping alien gods. They are worshiping gods who aren't real gods at all. Muslim gods and Jewish gods and Christian gods. Christians are especially good at this. Especially good at saying, well, they may be sort of like us, but those goddamn Mormons, really are heretics. Which is different than saying they're Republicans. But for some of us, may be very near. So the next stage is the politicization of belief. What happened in 325, the Council of Nicaea, where the Roman Empire adopted Christianity as the official religion. And it's what happens, it's the pressure in Islamic country to have the Sharia, the canon law applied to all of secular society. We've got to make society as a whole. That's what happens in the Christian right when they say, oh no, it's a Christian republic. It's supposed to be Christian. That's what it's about. And the state should enforce the correct kind of beliefs. So now that's the basic nature and structure of religion. And what that means is that when, in the first place, none of you who are Christians or something like it, if there is anything like it, you didn't choose. Most of you didn't choose this at all. The problem of religion is that we're born into it. We're born into an automatic identity. I say it this way, that human beings are biomythic animals. And when we're born, we have a certain kind of, the DNA informs us. You're going to be a man, you're going to be a woman, you're going to be tall, you're going to be short, whatever it is. But the moment we're born, people start to impose a story on us. And that story is you're white, you're black, you're Christian, you're Muslim, you're Republican, you're Democrat, whatever it is. This is a story. You're a Keene, you're a Jones, all these interlocking myths, and they always include the religious myths. Always include those. So one of the problems with religion is that it's not chosen. It's not chosen. We're born into it for the most part. And if you were raised in a Palestinian refugee camp, you would be a Muslim. You're raised in Jerusalem, in a Jewish context, you're going to be Jewish, Christian, so forth and so on. Okay, so what that tells us is that the religious life, the logic of the religious life is that you are going to follow the truth as it is delivered to you. Are there any ex-Methodists here, or are we even practicing? Yeah, okay. I've seen them. And the faith, I remember how it is, I think there's a hymn like that. Well, first of all, there's faith of our fathers living still. Our loves tell the story, the old story. Why are you telling the old story? Is there no new story? Religion is concerned with telling the old story, with getting back to the source from whence the knowledge of the sacred flow, the knowledge of a God who is an entity who came down, revealed himself to Moses or Jesus or Buddha, and that entity then becomes, the discovery of the will of that entity becomes the nature of the religious life. Now there are a few people who, so let me put it this way. It is as if your pilgrimage is going from where you are now to Timbuktu. And you are going to then go into the ecclesiastical AAA. No, excuse me, AAA. One A makes all the difference. And you're going to ask for a triptych. How many of you have you asked for triptychs when you go on a trip? And what it does is, it tells you every little stage of the journey. It details the stages of the journey. And again, religions always have a detailing of the stages of the Christian or of the religious journey. So the rites of passage and what the rites of passage are going to be. And here is what your life is going to be. A religion is going to prescribe the path of life for you before you've lived it. It's going to give you the map that you're supposed to follow. Okay? And if you are a good religious person, you are going to follow that map. I found in my yard a year or so ago a bracelet that said on it WWJD. I thought, boy, what's that? Worldwide Juvenile Delinquents or something? It's a new thing. And then somebody told me, no, that's what would Jesus do? So you see, you're always modeling your conduct and you're modeling what your consciousness should be in terms of a model of someone who is absent. And see, the one thing that they never asked me when I went to Sunday school, and they never asked me when I went to church, and they never asked me when I went to school, and they never asked me when I went to graduate school and got my PhD. Nobody ever asked me the question, who are you? Who are you? What is your experience of the Savior? Because institutions want you to live second-hand lives, the lives that's prescribed. And if they start asking, well, who are you? First of all, they begin to specialize in the questions. What kind of institution is that? As we're going to see, the sacred way of being in the world specializes in the questions. Alright, so that's the nature of religion. And there is a religious pilgrimage, and frankly, some people are comforted by that. They want that. They need that. They want a preordained form into which to pour their lives. They want the heroes and the heroines who show forth the kind of life that they should exemplify. They want it spelled out. Nothing wrong with that. There's a very different way. Now, as we know, there's been a lot of erosion of the religious way of going about life in our culture. The plain vanilla denominations are all losing members. They're not keeping up with it. Churches are closing. One of the reactions to that has been a whole group of people who still say, well, what do? I still have this hunger, and so we've had this explosion, especially in California, of spirituality. What does that mean? Well, largely it means that people have been experimenting with different kinds of sacred disciplines. Meditation, chanting, silence, and bells, and all of these things that they have borrowed from other religious traditions. And so we have spirituality is a matter of borrowing from wherever it is that you find that which feeds your spirit. It is so it's very individualistic. And that is its virtue, it's also its vice. Because spirituality tends to be an inner search. It's about me. It's about finding my self-esteem, about my connections. It's very, very little about community. One of the things that a religious approach has going for it is it's about community. My wife's church, which is a congregational church, They don't know much theology, frankly. I mean, how many Presbyterians here? Oh my God, you hardly have enough. Where are they going to learn to think about theology, right? Not from Methodism or, I don't know. But what they've got is they got community. Those people take care of each other. They love each other. I say, my wife, who's an incredible pastor, she loves a lot of people she doesn't even like. I don't like them either. So, spirituality, okay? Now, what's the difference now? Now I'm going into the one that I'm really an advocate for. That is for a sacred approach to life. Let me pause a minute. What I'm telling you is not hearsay for me. I was raised within a Protestant, Presbyterian, fundamentalist family. But we weren't slackers. My mother, who believed that the Bible was the Word of God, reasoned that if it was the Word of God, she should read it in the original. So she learned Hebrew and Greek and some Aramaic and learned it and read the Bible in the original. To the day she died, I remember she was very, it was just in her last weeks, as it turned out, and I asked her, actually I took my wife, we have only been married a few years, I took her to meet my mother, who was practically on her deathbed, and Patricia thought that she was going to say, now, do you really love my son? You're going to take good care of him and everything. She says, what did you preach about last Sunday? And I asked her, well, would you say you're a fundamentalist or evangelical? She says, fundamentalist. Evangelicals don't go far enough. So right from the get-go, I was raised in a family that took its religion very, 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 very seriously. And I said, I've just been writing about this. I said, for my mother, what I believed was not a matter of life or death. It was much more serious than that. It was a matter of salvation or damnation. Much more. And so the underground, the unconscious pressure upon me to believe was absolutely incredible. I didn't experience it that way, but when I was 10 or 11 years old, I went before the session to become a full adult member of the church. And I was asked about the Westminster Confession, the Apostles' Creed, and all that, and I gave the right answers. Now I look back and I say, what in hell was a 10-year-old boy doing that for? Where was the pleasure coming from? So already, you see, my mother put a tree in the middle of the Garden of Eden and said to me, don't eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Believe in the Lord Jesus. Tebow. Everybody know Tebow's faith? God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, whoever should believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. That's great. Except what if you have a philosophical inclination and you can't believe? If you doubt, you've lost. But anyway, I gradually began to revolt against that and to then begin to ask myself the question, what about me? What about me? And I wrote a book at that time. I'm always doing that when I don't know what else to do. Called To a Dancing God. And in that I explored, I said, look, if all of these other beliefs have collapsed, where do I find the sacred in my own life? And I started something then that became a movement for what we then called personal mythology. It said, look, instead of examining the life of Jesus or whoever it is, get some other template, I have to ask the question about my life. What's it about? Where did I come from? Where am I going? What do I believe? What should I do? What oughtn't I to do? What are my gifts? In other words, I begin to move away from a mythological approach to an autobiographical approach, which is what I'm going to recommend to you. That you, one part of a sacred discipline, in my way of thinking, is that you've got to write your autobiography. That's your dignity. Your dignity is in the life that you've lived. And how do you get community? You get real community only by storytelling. Only by telling somebody the story of your life and they tell you the story of your life. If you don't know the story of your, quote, friend's life, then you're not relating to them on a level of great respect and dignity. Our dignity comes out of the way that we form the narrative of our own lives. So I want to go back now and suggest now that what is the essence of a way of approaching the sacred? Now notice the sacred isn't a noun. It's not an entity. So the question, which is at the heart of a secular, of a sacred way of living, is the question of what does it mean to live in the presence of the sacred? Very different than the question of how do I find a God or the will of a God. It says, look, this world, we may live in it in such a way as to experience it as totally secular and profane and intrinsically meaningless, to be given meaning only by whether we manufacture it into board feet or something else. Or we may live in the world in such a way as to intuit and experience everything in that world as potentially sacred. That's the choice. I'm going to tell you just a vignette to make it very clear. I'm not talking about something esoteric. I'm talking about the simplest thing in the world. So the other day I'm going through the line in the Sonoma Market. And the checkout girl is just dicking around. And I haven't heard. I said, come on, I don't have all day. And I noticed that when I say that her face sort of tightens up, the muscles down here tighten. And then I noticed that she looks kind of gray. You know, there's a kind of gray around the eyes that you suspect may be from sickness or certainly from some fatigue. And I looked at her and I saw that. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. You know, I'm just feeling pissy today. She says, yeah, I know what you mean. I have lots of days like that. Now, everything I want to say, I can pull out from that little example. My first contact with her was not the contact with a person, not the contact with any being that should be reverenced, respected, wondered at, loved. It was a contact with a function, with a malfunctioning machine made out of flesh, incidentally, who had only an outside, no inside, no story, who was disturbing me by her inattention to my self. One moment something shifted. Suddenly, that was a human being. That was a woman with a story. That was somebody that I could both respect and have compassion for. I had made the transition in that moment from a secular, profane way of dealing with the world I was encountering to a sacred, to being in the presence of a sacred being. Now, what I'm suggesting in the broadest sense is that the path of the sacred is nothing more than that. That movement between the profane and the sacred which takes place and which needs to take place 100 times a day. And the first great clue then, the first great goalpost of this life is stop, look, and listen. And so much then just depends on that. I haven't thought about these in this way for a while, so you write them down, and then you tell me if and you can give them back to me. Stop, look, and listen. Now, you notice that itself is a spiritual, is a sacred discipline that implies all other kinds of things. Why? Because to pay attention to somebody else, I got to get out of myself. I have to be Gabriel Marcel, a great French philosopher, who I did a book about, says you have to become available to somebody else. And all of us know hundreds of ways of not being available. Of not looking, of not smelling, of not listening, of not caring, of not bothering. And so, what do? We create a facade, an ego. And most of our relationships, most of the time with other people, are relationships of facade to facade. That's one of the reasons we're a lonely country. Because we value things, so many things more than we value being present to one another. Although at some deep level we know that's what it's all about. So now, given that the sacred journey involves this becoming present to other beings in a way that reverences them and respects them. Albert Schweitzer, when he first went out to Africa, was going, for some reason, he was crossing a river where there were all these hippos. And he suddenly saw the light on him. He said, reverence for life. That phrase came into his mind. And he said, that's the essence of what it's all about. Reverence for the other person's life. Because we also know, incidentally, that I can't really reverence my own life without reverencing yours. Reverence we catch it. We catch it from somebody. We're not persuaded into it. All right, now so I'm going to play with now just a few of the kinds of emotions because I'm going to talk about to live in the presence of the sacred is to go back into what I call primal emotions. There are some emotional responses that come with the territory, and there are a lot of others that are put on us. Freud said that we repress a great many emotions. We repress our own cruelty, our insatiability, lots about our sexuality, all this bad stuff we repress. We keep it unconscious. Just interestingly, because now it's not unconscious, it's on MTV every night. You cannot find anything that Freud thought we repressed and was repressed in the 19th century that isn't prime time. So our society society teaches us to have certain kinds of emotions, doesn't it? It teaches us, for instance, what's the Dow doing this week? The heart of Wall Street is the heart of an education of the emotions, because it's about greed. Greed makes the world go round. Acquisitiveness, possessiveness. Our society teaches us these emotions are the good emotions. It also teaches us heroism. I met this beautiful young man 2 weeks ago. Brilliant, comes from one of the great, as a matter of fact, one of his parents was recently a governor of the state. And he's going to go in the Marines because he's interested in honor. Honor is one of the most dangerous emotions there is. I think as Mark Twain says, patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel. So, what does our culture teaches us? You know, what is the song in the South Pacific? You have to be taught before you're 6 or 7 or 8 to hate all the people your relatives hate. I did a whole book and a whole movie, which is back there and appears somewhere available, about how we dehumanize others in order to justify killing them. And it's just good patriotism. You're not going to tell me, are you, that those boys who died in Afghanistan died in vain? We can't even say it. We can't even say it. We're so deeply indoctrinated with a certain set of emotions. Now, what Freud didn't tell us, because he didn't know, he was so anti-religious, he didn't tell us that we also repress the emotions of the sacred emotions. The first one, and the most important, wonder, the sense of wonder. Aristotle said, philosophy begins in wonder. So what is wonder but that experience that when you're walking along in a perfectly good day out here in Oakmont, you're probably thinking, am I burning enough calories? What's happening to the value of my house? Will my pension last? You put all those things, and bam! Suddenly, the whole world disappears before your feet. Why should there be something rather than nothing? Why is there something? You're right, it's called ontological. Yeah. Wonder is not a cultural emotion. We don't have to be taught before we're 6 or 7 or 8 to wonder. As a matter of fact, we have to have it squeezed out of us. Tillich used to tell the story of a kid who's riding along with his father out in the country and he sees these 2 animals over there grazing. He says, "Daddy, what are those?" The father says, "Well, those are cows, son." He says, "Why?" Why? Why are they cows? Over supper, we found out that several of us had real infatuations with quantum physics and astronomy and things like that. And we're going over what we knew. Fortunately, we had at least somebody who had a physics degree. I realized, you get all this quantum stuff figured out. You still can't give it. A physicist still can't give an answer to why a cow. Why? And as soon as you entertain the sense of wonder, with it comes other things. First of all, with it comes appreciation and gratitude. Why should there be anything? We are given this incredibly beautiful world. There also comes with it almost an equal measure of terror. Rudolf Otto used to say the basic mystery of life is at once compelling and desirable and fearful and terrifying. Because this world that brought us in is going to take us out without our consent. And in the degree that you refuse to feel anxiety and terror, you will not feel wonder. You don't get your choice of experiencing one or the other. You get your choice of experiencing more or less. We can so constrict our lives, and as T.S. Eliot said, distract ourselves from distraction by distraction. Or we can keep opening up. And the more that you open up, the more you are going to deal with a world that you can't control. Can't control. A world then that you either have to decide whether you're safe in that, or you have to decide it's too dangerous for you to really give yourself to it. Okay, I got to get through this. I have only started the introduction. Let's see. What my notes are always to tell me how much to leave out, not how much to put in. All right. Okay. So here's a basic kind of itinerary of the sacred journey. And the first is go into the desert. You got to go into the desert. They all tell us this. And what that means is to go into a place where you begin to strip yourself systematically of what you believe. You begin to entertain, like Descartes did, a discipline of doubt and of questioning. When you go into the wilderness, that's what it's about. You begin to say, wait a minute, where did I get this identity as America? Where did I get these beliefs? Who are they? What am I working for? What's money for? All those things, to go in and to have a radical period of self-questioning, of seeing the kind of life that you have lived and where you got that idea. Now, with that, so there is what I would call the blessing of doubt. Blessing of doubt. That was a gift I got from my mother she didn't want to give me. Because in any family, whatever, somebody's going to pick up everything. Doubt was something she couldn't do, so I got assigned to be the doubter. Little did she know that fundamentalism would lead me to Harvard. In the desert, you do certain things. The desert is about, first of all, fasting. Literally, but also figuratively. Fasting of one of the great forms, I love this, and I'll tell you and I'll propose that you do it and you won't do it. I know you won't. Nobody's ever taken up this challenge. It's called linguistic asceticism. Now, you notice all of your big words, your $10 words, okay? And you write down your $10 words, say 20 of them for you, really important words for you. And then you don't get to use them for a month. Especially all those religious words, those great words, those fine words. You remember, I remember him. It was on television last night. No. Didn't anybody watch the movie about Hemingway?
Oh yeah.
And yeah, what he said was, something like, I hate the words of honor and glory and bravery and all that. All that's just bullshit. There's only the name of a place where a person suffered and died and where somebody fought. So to strip yourself of all of the great political canards. What you believe politically. I mean, if we took away from the candidates running for whatever office, especially, no, I won't better be careful. All the words that in the last 5 months you've heard at least 10,000 times, and pundits telling you the same thing and arguing over this, took those away. Take that all away. Don't think about the political process in that way that you normally do. Don't choose up sides. But whatever religion you've got, put it away for a while. You bring it back. And the way you conceive of and think of and talk to your main squeeze. Your names. Your pet names. Now my wife and I have a little discipline which involves making up new names every day for each other. Currently I'm Nacho. With or without cheese, I don't know. And she may be Chicken of the Sea. Some days she's Chicken of the Sea. And some days she's Rose of Sharon. Make up new names, because every time you make up a new name, it forces your mind to go around and to think different things. God, G-O-D. How about cosmic karma control? Or the self-surpassing surpasser of all? Or the source of all, the erotic center of the world? Or there are dozens of them in my book. Hey, I forget them. Here's one of my great theological ideas. Do it, okay? Make up 3 new names for God. Utterly new. And put them on a postcard and send them to 3 friends. And tell them to send them to 3 friends. Now, are there mathematicians here? There's somebody who can tell you how to fix it so that it comes back to you. It's a Ponzi scheme, theological Ponzi scheme. And you're going to, within 6 weeks, you're going to have about 1 million new names for what you used to call, boringly, G-O-D. And each one of those new names will tell you something. Tell you something. And will change your way of looking at relating to the world. So, of course, you're going to practice the other great disciplines of compassion, empathy and compassion, because that's a part of that's an inevitable part of learning to honor the other person. Now, there are a couple other things that you have to do in the desert, and then I'm going to turn you loose. And one of them is you have to repent. One of the great things about a sacred way of being in the world is that it recognizes sin, evil. There is no authentic religious, spiritual, or sacred way of looking at the world that does not acknowledge the reality of evil and sin. Why sin? Christian tradition talks about metanoia. Well, metanoia is just the exact opposite in Greek of paranoia. We're taught to be paranoid. We're taught to believe it's other people, it's a dangerous world. We're taught to believe it's them who's doing it to us. Iran is a threat to American security. They might get a bomb. Maybe. And Israel has 400 or 500, 800, we're not sure. That's not a threat to us. The line between good and evil runs right down here. The axis of evil is a part of the brokenness of my heart and the brokenness of my being. It must be honored because I have not lived a perfect life. I have not gone through these 80 years without hurting other people. In fact, I bought a great deal of my freedom at the price of other people's suffering. I won't ask how many people are divorced. Any of you who are know what I mean. I am a being who must repent of the injury that I have done, and I must ask for forgiveness. Not pretend that I am without fault. That's a part of the desert experience. That's a hard part. Again, I won't ask how many have been in AA, not AAA, but AA. AA knows this. AA knows that there's no healing without repentance, without acknowledgement and repentance and the asking for forgiveness. And it's part of the desert experience. It's part of the experience of the sacred. Now and of course this also involves the whole thing of loving the questions. Love a life that's filled with questions. The question is here's the whole thing, see? The question is the quest you're on. Whatever questions you ask are going to, whatever the questions that you ask and the questions that you refuse to ask are going to determine the quality of life that you have. That's simple. If you ask very few questions, you'll have very few enlightening perspectives enter into the already decided sanctuary of your life. So, with all of this, of course, goes the whole thing that there's no authentic way of being in the world in a sacred way without acknowledging that the world makes a demand on you, makes a demand on us to work for justice. It's the same thing as compassion, the same thing as caring for others in the world. The problem, as I said earlier about spirituality, is it doesn't make any demands on us. Not for other people. The thing about religion, the word religion, the good part of the word religion is religio. It's a bond. Religion is ideally is the acknowledging of a bond with other people. I am not just me alone in this world. I am with others. And I am concerned for others, and I am only authentic when I'm expressing that in some kind of quest for justice. That brings me to the last one, in some sense, one of my favorite ones. And that is, look for your vocation. What calls you? What appeals to you? What are your gifts? Our sense of intimate meaning in the world doesn't come because of what we have. It comes because of what we do with our gifts. What calls to us, and that we know who we are in responding to a call that demands we use our talents and our gifts to the utmost. That's why an artist or a doctor or a lawyer, whoever feels the drive of his or her life as a calling. Not a job. A calling will be filled with a sense of meaning, a purpose. A purpose-driven life is a life of responding to a calling. And to end, the great refreshing insight which is at the basis of that phrase I used as the subtitle of my book, Living in the Presence of the Sacred. The great relaxing thing about that is the realization that there isn't any sacred journey. No journey. No place to go. We're already there. We're already in the middle of of a world inflected with meaning and calling and all that. We don't got to go anywhere. We just got to respond to it as we go through every day. Every day will present you with some checkout girl or mechanic or whatever, or injured squirrel. I'm big on squirrels. It's calling. It's calling. Noticing. Stop, look, listen. Reverence my being. Stand in awe before simple humanity of the person across from you. There's nowhere else to go, no place else we need to go.
Two-part question. Don't you feel that the basis, that part of the basis of all organized religions is the inability to cope with the notion of death? And the second part is, what are your feelings about death?
Okay. The answer to the first question is the best possible answer ever given to this is Ernest Becker's book, Denial of Death. He won the Pulitzer Prize for it. I interviewed him on his deathbed. It's not just religion that is circumcised around death. What Becker talks about is an immortality project of we all have some way of assuring ourselves that we survive death. In a book that we do, in a song that we write, whatever it is, that these immortality, or as a nation, that we create the golden city on the hill, or we create the perfect Islamic republic, or whatever it is. Those are all responses to death. What do I think about death? A lot. And I'm basically not for it. I don't remember signing that in the contract, but I must have. So I think everything about death that you think about when you're really honest. I think the idea that I totally disappear, I think that when I die, I totally disappear into nothingness. Zilch. Light goes out. End of story. I also think exactly the opposite. It is impossible that I disappear. It is impossible that death kills me. We were talking at supper again. I've been so hooked on these things of the formation of stars and galaxies and supernovas and the black holes and recently. And you realize that and there are 125 to 150 billion galaxies, give or take a few. What's a few galaxies among friends? Galaxies, each of which has probably way more stars than that. And they're always in a process of death and transformation. I mean, the gases, some gases begin to sort of rub on each other, and they rub on each other, and they get hot. That's what happens when you rub on each other, even up there. And pretty soon something new is born. They begin to, and then that more and more heat, there's that, the black hole forms, and they begin to draw, they begin to feed. All these things, they feed, and they get fat, and they get hot, and then they boom, go over again. Now, when people say, it's impossible to imagine that my consciousness survives my bodily death, what I say is any form of intelligence that can manage 150 billion galaxies on an average Saturday afternoon putting my spirit and my body together, again, isn't even 101. I cannot imagine the limits of the possibilities about what happens with consciousness. And I just can't imagine. So what I try to do is I won't say I prepare for death, I don't, but I prepare to prepare for it. Which means that I try to acknowledge through all of my denial mechanisms that I am mortal. Some would even claim that I am old. My birth certificate says I'm 80. But we know those documents are frequently forged. Especially in Hawaii, right? So, I try to live with a sense that I'm so grateful for having been here. And I didn't come here by my own will, and I'm not leaving by my own will. So there's some kind of intricate process that I could call G-O-D, or if I wanted, that seems to be in charge, or if not in charge, working out its destiny in a way that involves me and you and everything else. That's the best I can do, It's interesting. I think it was 3 years ago, I was in Iran, and I was sitting after having supper, lunch, and I got up to reach the camera, and I fell, and I hit my head on the steel railing and again on the floor, 6 feet down. In short, I developed a subdural hematoma 3 weeks later, and I had 3 surgeries. And my son said, Dad, the thing that really, really amazed me is how stoic you were. You've always been very afraid of death. And I said, yeah, I don't know what that was about. But being nearer to it didn't make me more terrified than I have been when I've been far away from it. So, death is... Karl Jaspers, the philosopher, said, the problem of evil is the rock on which all systems shipwreck. That's also true about the fact of death. Every system shipwrecks on it. So how do we live in a world where we die with a sense of gratitude?
Sam, I appreciate you bringing in the sense of gratitude there, because for me that's such a big part of living in the presence of the sacred. First of all, I should tell you that I grew up in the church that your wife is your spouse is the minister of. And
I think you had it right the first time, that my spouse is the wife of.
I've been an ordained clergy person in the UCC for 35 years, and that was a great sermon that you just gave. And it made me think, I wish I was a philosopher so I could say some of the things that you were able to say. And I want to tell you that I read maybe 3 or 4 of your books in seminary. They influenced me quite a bit, and I would encourage anyone who hasn't had a chance to read his books to
I second that.
pick one up. And my question is about the ego and the facade, and just between you and I now, not worrying about what other people might overhear, but just between you and I, how much does our ego, which I see as basically self-centered, I might be wrong, how much does our ego, our facade, get in the way of us living, or even being aware of, or even being open to the sacred in our lives?
Well, ego is one of those slippery words. put it this way, a high self-esteem is not a necessary impediment to the life of the Spirit. A high self-esteem based upon no kinds of virtues that you aspire to is. All of us have a facade that's self-protective, that we have to get behind in order to go deeper. We have to repent of. I have to repent a lot of my ego. But the problem was that ego was also what drove me to go beyond it. So that ego also drove me to ask questions, to get an education, to write, to put myself out there.
How do you know that wasn't the sacred?
How what?
How do you know that wasn't the sacred? That was.
I think some of it exactly was the sacred. Exactly. That's what I'm going on to say. Turtles don't walk around without shells. And Nietzsche said every profound spirit loves and needs a mask. A part of it. So if I can separate the mask function that I have from the masking function, which is essentially my protecting of my privacy, from that part of me that is basically neurotic in the sense that Karen Horney talked about neurosis as a vacillation between these glorified images of myself and degraded images of myself. Now that's what the ego does. One day, I'm really great. How come you people are so damn stupid? And the next day I said, oh my God, why am I so stupid? They really were, that part of the ego is an enemy of the life of the Spirit, I think. But working through it is a necessity to the cultivation of a sense of the sacred, which is, in that sense, an acknowledgement of who you really are, including there is an incredible kind of what I want to call modest pride that's involved in real sacred sense of yourself. I'm not going to go around and say, those books were just as sort of like Jonathan. My books are sort of like Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I'm not going to say that. I'm also not going to say, well, Dostoevsky had nothing over me. I want a realistic sense of who I am and appreciation of that. So I have to take that word apart, the ego word apart, and say it performs a lot of. The word ego performs way too much duty. It's on duty too often. Does that answer it?
I don't know.
Hi, Sam. I really enjoyed it. I think the word sermon was a good characterization of the presentation that you made here tonight. And listening to you speak, I get the impression that you may entertain the possibility that there might be a power greater than us. And I'll let you answer that, whether there is or there isn't. But if there is, what do you think that power expects of you?
Is there a power greater than me? I hardly know how to answer something like that. We used to have a kind of vulgar phrase we used when we were kids. You're no more than a pimple on a piss-ass's balls. Well, that's about my size or your size, As I say, I didn't even come here of my own regard. And furthermore, it took at least 1 billion, I'm going to be conservative. It took 1 billion stars in our little galaxy, which is small, the Milky Way, dying for a minimum of 14 billion years to create the stuff out of which I'm born. So I'm just a stockpile of stardust. I'm just reconstituted stardust. I'm what do you call it? I'm recycled stardust. Now something is moving this process. To compare my little being in any sense to that is Saturday Night Live stuff. What do I think it wants from me? Well, see, there I have to go inside. I have to go to my sense of vocation, of who I am, what my gifts are. What part do I have a part to play in this drama? And to figure that out from, again, this whole thing of what I call the ontological virtues, the elements of the elemental emotions.
A comment and a question. The first you spoke of the origins of religion. And I think one of the things, in my opinion, you left out is that all religions have a holy text. The Bible, the Quran, the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, the Pali, Buddhism, and so on. In other words, these become what everybody follows. The follower, Jesus himself, is long dead. We don't know what he thinks anymore. But his words are encapsulated 70 to 200 years after his death in what we call the Holy Bible. And I think that's a crucial part of any religion, is to have some sort of holy text. The next is more a question. Thomas Jefferson and Paine, as you know, were both deists.
Say again the first part.
Jefferson and Thomas Paine were both deists.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and the deist, as I understand it, it comes from a French philosophy, is that there is a creator to all of this, but he really doesn't give a damn. He doesn't answer prayer. He doesn't care what you do with your life. He simply created this and walked away. What's your thoughts on that?
I wonder where he walked. First of all, was it a he?
He ran.
He ran. There are, I guess, three fundamental models, if you want to use the God word. One is the deist word, and that's exactly what the clockmaker winds it up and leaves. The other is the theist word, is the theist worldview. Well, and again, it's always he's still back there and is creating this, but he has concern especially for certain peoples, that he gives certain land to and things like that. And then the third one is called, and then there's actually there are four. Pantheism just means, look, it's the resonant spirit in all things. And the fourth is called panentheism. And it's a combination of, well, yes, the sacred or the God, the spirit is spread abroad everywhere else, but it also transcends them and transcends and encompasses them. I don't use any of those spatial metaphors anymore. They don't. I mean, they're all so pathetically limited, you know. I try again, as I say, see, the meat of the thing for me is to try to keep all of these sacred emotions in play in my life. And another part of my desert experience is holy agnosticism. I believe deeply in being an agnostic. I think atheisms are just as foolish as fundamentalists, Christian fundamentalists. I have to tell you about the time I recently lost my nerve. I didn't do what I should do. Richard Dawkins was speaking at my wife's church. And for 1 hour he harangued us about the theory of evolution. And I knew what to say, and I chickened out because I knew my wife would get on my tail. I should have stood and said, Mr. Dawkins, you're not in Kansas anymore. There's nobody in this audience who doesn't believe in evolution. Do you have anything to say to us? So, I don't know where that came out of, but it's a good story.
Yes, Sam. Many years ago, you gave a lecture at Wells Fargo, and I was quite impressed by it. You talked about IQ, intelligence quotient, and LQ, if you recall that. That was the love quotient, and why it is not taught in our society. And over the past 25 years, do you feel it has evolved, or has greed and fear perhaps put a cap on it?
Good question. I think that we have grown in our understanding of those things that make it difficult for us to love others and those that might make it easier. I think just, for instance, of Dan Goleman's work on emotional intelligence and the whole idea of that neurologists have discovered a mirror neuron in that automatically helps us to, or mirrors other people's conducts and feelings. We know so much more about early childhood experiences and how they could create either an easier time or a difficult time of loving. I don't think the world's any more loving place than it was. Damn, excuse me. Good salmon, second time around. But what I think is that there are developing, I know this, Paul Hawken wrote a marvelous book called Blessed Unrest, where he said, we're in the middle of the largest social revolution we've ever had, and we don't even see it. And it's called the emergence of the NGOs, of non-government organizations. All over the world, people are saying, governments aren't doing it. They're not doing any damn thing about the landmines. So we'll get on the computers and we'll get a network and we'll get the landmine thing on the issue. They haven't done it. Our government did nothing about Darfur until a bunch of kids in college with computers began to agitate for us to play there. I mean, there are all these organizations that are, if you want to say the church has exploded, its quest for justice has infiltrated a society, so that we've got Save the Children, we've got Amnesty International, we've got goats, what's it called? Heifer Project, which is one of my absolute favorites because we have to re-ruralize a lot in the world. We've got, name them, Oxfam, Church World Service. I just went to Kenya with Church World Service about 3 months ago and saw the kind of things that they're doing in these little villages, where people have to walk 4 or 5 hours a day, women always, to get water. I explained to them how they could cut the birth rate by making the men walk, and then be too tired. It didn't go over big. So there is the emergence. Goodness will keep popping up. It will keep popping up.
You spoke very beautifully. Put it up. You spoke very beautifully to acceptance and that emotion and embracing. Could you speak to, because you also spoke to the reality of evil, could you speak to how one embraces and accepts the evil that is in the world? It's clearly in abundance. It's in very simple things, and it's in very complex things.
Yeah. What I think of as a sacred discipline is reading the New York Times. It doesn't have to be the Times, but it's not going to be the Chronicle. Something that I think we have an obligation to keep the horror of our world in our minds. Not to just exit out, not to deal with the news, not to deal with what's happening. And the second thing is, I think we ask, in terms of vocation, of gifts, where do I enter the struggle against some concrete form of evil? Not how do I do everything, but to pick something where you have a contribution to make. Maybe it's Habitat for Humanity, or maybe it's, whatever it is. Or maybe it's just the way that you do your profession, and then the way you nurse at Kaiser, or whatever, where you tend to, you tend in a sacred way to others' needs. Because the awareness of evil will drive us into despair if we don't have something, some action that we can take to minimize it in some degree.
Sam, thank you very much for an incredible presentation tonight. We'd like to thank all of you for joining tonight in our special edition of the Sunday Symposium. We hope to see you here at 10:30. If you're new to Sunday Symposium, we do have a website, OakSunSym, that's the first three letters of our name, oaksunsim.org, and we have many, many of our programs from the past recorded for your enjoyment. Thank you very much for attending tonight.
One moment. Just one moment. I have a word from my sponsor. I have all kinds of books back there if you're interested. The stuff I have done on propaganda and evil is in Faces of the Enemy. It's also a PBS documentary we did on that. There's the recent book on the absence of God. There's what else is that? Oh, there's a 6-tape series that not tape now, but CDs on the spiritual quest that I just got this last week. And there's a book that I get, which comes with a total money-back guarantee. It's called Sightings, and it's a book about birds, except it's really about epiphanies and about the sense of sacred that comes to us sometimes from an indigo bunting or even a blue jay. And if you buy that, you are not to read more than a chapter a day. I'm willing to autograph any. Remember that Christmas is coming up and you have friends.